It was a grey day when the black-cloaked figure emerged from the chapel, her veil damp with rain and mourning. A low bell tolled in the distance, its sound swallowed by the thick mist that curled around the mourners like the cold fingers of death itself. The grave yawned open at her feet, an obscene wound carved into the consecrated earth of St. Hildegard's Abbey. They buried Lord Ulrich of Westermont that morning, once a powerful baron, now just bones and ash sealed within a casket of polished yew. He had died suddenly, or so the physicians said, their eyes refusing to meet hers. Poison, whispered the maids. God's will, murmured the priests. Treason, thought the widow. Isolde stood perfectly still as they lowered him down, her hands clasped tightly around a rosary that had belonged to her mother. The beads were stained from years of grief. Her face, pale as milk glass, betrayed nothing. Her dark hair, untouched by age despite her 38 winters, had been twisted into a braided crown. A storm brewed in her eyes, though no tears fell. Behind her, nobles from all corners of the realm of Estertale watched her with a mixture of pity and dread. Isolde of Riarnach had long been a quiet presence at court, beautiful, dutiful, and altogether unremarkable in their eyes. Married off at 16 to a man twice her age, she had played the role of wife, stepmother, and hostess to Lord Ulrich's ambitions. But now the Baroness stood alone, childless and free, her mourning gown clinging to her like shadows. The sermon ended. Dirt fell. And then, as if summoned by the hand of fate, a gust of wind swept through the abbey grounds, overturning lanterns and scattering petals from the funeral bier. One lantern struck the hem of a maiden's cloak, and in moments, flame danced among the flowers. The fire consumed the altar. Screams erupted. Monks ran for water. Isolde stood in the chaos, unmoving, watching the fire climb the walls of the ancient chapel with an expression of hollow fascination. It was as if something deep inside her, something buried under decades of submission, had awakened. Later that night, she rode alone back to Westermont Keep, the charred sky above her and the scent of smoke thick in her hair. No one dared stop her. No one spoke. Waiting at the gate was Sir Othric, Ulrich's captain of arms and one of the few men who had ever shown her kindness. "My lady," he said, bowing stiffly. "Shall I summon your stepson, Lord Marius?" She paused, her voice soft. "No. He needn't return yet." He hesitated. "But the keep is his, now." Her lips twitched. "Is it?" She passed him without another word, her heels striking the stone like hammers. In the great hall, the fire had already been stoked, but it cast a strange light on the tapestries. She stood before the hearth and stared into the flames. Ulrich had died with secrets. And she had learned too late what he had done to her family, her father, her brother, the land stolen, the alliance broken. Isolde had once been promised to a duke's heir, but Ulrich had taken her for himself, crushing her lineage under his ambition. She had lived quietly, bearing the humiliation like a second skin. But death had changed her. The very next morning, she ordered the steward to seal the keep's treasury and dismiss half the household. "No one is to enter or leave the estate," she said. "Not until I say so." The steward, old and compliant, blinked in confusion. "But my lady, the retainers, the vassals, they will wait." Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she had gone mad with grief. Others whispered she had poisoned Ulrich herself. But those who looked into her eyes saw something more terrifying than madness. Purpose. That week, she rode to the nearby monastery and demanded the abbess relinquish the ancient Riarnach records that had been taken after her family's fall. "They belong to my house," she said. You are Ulrich's widow now, the abbess replied coldly. That name is buried. Isolde turned to the guards. Burn the gate. She left with the scrolls and an oath of silence from the terrified sisters. In the Tower Library of Westermont, she pored over ink and vellum, tracing names, debts, betrayals. She found the signature of the king, his seal pressed beside Ulrich's. A decree of attainder. Her father had been declared a traitor with no trial. 12 names appeared on the writ. Lords and ministers. High clergy. Nobles who had profited from her family's ruin. Isolde burned the candle to the wick. Her eyes bled with sleep. And when the candle died, she whispered to the dark, "Not one of them shall sleep again." One by one, she wrote the names onto parchment. A list. A ledger of vengeance. On the 7th night, the silence of the keep broke. A raven arrived, its wings soaked in storm, a message bound to its leg. The wax seal bore a lion rampant. The king had summoned her to court. She read the message without blinking, then handed it to Othric. "Prepare the carriage," she said. "We ride at dawn." He looked at her with unease. "Do you mean to go alone?" "No. I'll need 4 guards. And the black velvet." Othric nodded and left, but before he reached the stair, she called after him. "And burn Ulrich's banner from the walls." He paused. "Hang the crest of Riarnach in its place." The next morning, as the carriage rolled away from Westermont, the wind howled like a warning across the moors. Peasants watched from behind fences, their eyes wide as they saw the crest return, a black stag crowned in thorns. The Queen Dowager's cousin, Lord Darren of Hollowmere, stood waiting at the gates of Velmire Palace. He held the king's command in hand and a sneer on his lips. "What game is this, widow?" he said as she stepped out. "No game," she said, her voice cold as the rain. "Merely the settling of old accounts." He laughed, mocking her. But his laughter died that night, when flames rose from Hollowmere's manor, and his youngest son was found weeping in the chapel, whispering that a pale woman in black had come to kiss his father's brow. Lord Darren was dead. Isolde had only just begun. The corridors of Velmire Palace were vast and cold, marble and stone echoing with every measured step. Outside, the city of Asterthail buzzed under a thin, grey drizzle that seemed to soak not just the streets but the very bones of its people. Isolde had arrived under the pretense of mourning. The king's summons made it a necessity for a widow of her stature to appear. Yet beneath her somber exterior, a slow-burning plan festered, like coals hidden beneath winter snow. She entered the audience chamber, the heavy oak doors groaning behind her, and found the king waiting. He was an aging man, gaunt, with hair the color of winter ash, his eyes sharp yet weary, betraying decades of courtly deceit. At his side stood Lady Moran, the queen consort, a woman whose beauty had once been celebrated in tapestries and poems, but whose icy smile concealed a spine of steel. They exchanged curt bows. "Lady Isolde," the king intoned, voice like rusted iron, "we are grieved by your loss. It was, after all, Lord Ulrich's service that kept the northern borders secure. Your presence honors the crown." Isolde, inclining her head, replied softly, "I serve only justice for those who deserve it." Her words, carefully measured, drifted like smoke into the chamber. No one seemed to hear, but the queen's lips thinned. "You are summoned because," the king continued, "there are opportunities to strengthen alliances. The crown values your wisdom and lineage, even in widowhood. Perhaps a closer partnership with your house will ensure stability." Isolde smiled faintly. It was not a smile of warmth, it was a smile of calculation. Opportunities are often hidden behind crowns and courts, Your Majesty. I am eager to see what yours might conceal. The king chuckled, but the queen's eyes narrowed. It was in that moment that Isolde knew her path. She would not beg for power, she would seize it. That evening, she retired to a modest chamber within the palace. Candles flickered in their sconces, casting shadows that stretched across the walls, long as the corridors of her mind. She spread out the records she had taken from the Riarnach archives, the parchment stiff under her fingers. Names, titles, lands, and debts glared at her. Lords who had profited from her father's demise, merchants who had stolen fortunes, clergy who had blessed lies, each one marked. And yet she had learned a cruel truth: the king himself had signed the decree. Her vengeance would have to ascend to the throne if it were to reach its fullest measure. Her first act was subtle. She befriended the chambermaids, soft-spoken girls who had access to corridors, ledgers, and whispered confidences. Gifts of silk and silver earned their loyalty quickly, and soon Isolde learned of the plotting that coursed through the palace like a disease. Poison, bribes, and secret marriages, none of it escaped her scrutiny. Through these quiet investigations, she discovered that Lady Maren had been plotting to secure the northern territories by marrying her niece to Marius, Lord Ulrich's stepson. The alliance would have been inevitable had Isolde not arrived. A cold smile curved her lips. Let the queen make her move, she would meet it with her own. One night, in the palace garden under a crescent moon, Isolde spoke with Sir Othric. "My lady," he murmured, glancing over the hedges, "this court is venomous." "Even one misstep is a step closer to my goal," Isolde interrupted softly. "Do not caution me against their venom, Othric. I have been stung before. Now, I intend to bite back." Her words carried a chill that even the night could not absorb. Days passed, and she became an enigma at court. Gentle in manner, yet the sharpness of her gaze unsettled even seasoned ministers. She learned quickly which nobles were bribed by gold, which feared punishment, and which simply desired power. Each day she built invisible networks, loyalty bought with favors, fear, and promises of shared revenge. The king, growing increasingly impressed by her presence, summoned her once again to the council chamber. "Lady Isolde," he said, "your counsel has been most enlightening. I propose that you serve as advisor to the crown, especially in matters of the northern territories." Isolde inclined her head. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty. Though I must ask, do you expect me to act solely for your interests?" The king hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his lined face. "I trust that your wisdom aligns with the crown's needs." "Yes," she said, the word a whispered dagger. "It aligns with justice." From that moment, her influence grew. Every noble who crossed her path learned to measure words carefully. Whispered rumors of her cunning spread through the city. Those who doubted her presence at court, especially the queen and her closest allies, began to fear what they could not see. And then the first strike came. A merchant accused one of the king's favored lords of embezzlement, a crime traced through ledgers Isolde had quietly ensured were scrutinized. The court erupted into scandal. The accused man was arrested, his lands seized, his family disgraced. Isolde watched from the gallery, silent. She did not celebrate. There was no joy in vengeance, only the cold, clinical satisfaction of progress. But whispers in the corridors of power are rarely silent for long. Lady Maren approached her later that evening, mask of courtesy barely concealing her ire. "Your presence at court is remarkable," the queen said, her tone icy yet sweet. "You weave webs with such delicacy. Perhaps, too delicately. Isolde inclined her head slightly. Webs are only dangerous when they catch those who deserve them. The queen's hands tightened around the folds of her gown. Be careful, my lady. The crown does not reward ambition unchecked. Isolde's eyes gleamed, reflecting the candlelight like shards of glass. Nor does it forgive betrayal. A silence fell between them, brittle and taut as a drawn bow. In that moment, Isolde realized the true depth of the game she had entered. Not just revenge but survival. Every move had to be precise, every whisper calculated. The very next morning, a letter arrived at her chamber door. Sealed with the royal crest, it bore a summons even more personal than before: attend the king at dusk. A matter of utmost importance regarding the northern borders and your family's lands. Your counsel is required alone. Isolde broke the seal with deliberate care. Inside, she found a map of northern estates, her family's rightful holdings, now fragmented and under control of men who had wronged her. A single phrase had been added in a hand she did not recognize: some debts can only be settled in shadow. Her heart quickened, though her expression remained calm. This was no mere invitation, it was a challenge. A trap. And yet, she felt a thrill she had not known since her youth, before betrayal had hollowed her heart. She summoned Othric. Prepare the horses. We ride at nightfall. Bring only those we trust. Leave all others behind. The gates of the palace closed behind them as the moon rose. Mist swirled across the moorlands, hiding their path. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, and the wind whispered of secrets long buried. Isolde gripped the reins with hands steady as iron, the parchment map folded tightly beneath her cloak. Somewhere ahead, she knew, lurked the first of her enemies. And somewhere else, closer than she dared imagine, loomed the king's own ambition, entwined with danger and deceit. The carriage plunged into darkness, the hooves striking sparks against the cobblestones. She felt the cold of the night seep into her bones, yet she welcomed it. The shadow would protect her. The night would guide her. And when they arrived at the outskirts of a ruined fortress forgotten by time, rumored to be haunted by spirits of traitors, she dismounted. The air smelled of damp stone and iron. Othric whispered, "My lady, are you certain?" "Yes," she said, cutting him off. "Tonight, we will meet the first of those who wronged us. And by dawn, the balance will begin to shift." A sudden rustle in the darkness. A figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, their face obscured. And when they spoke, their voice sent a shiver through the night. "Lady Isolde, you should not have come alone." She stepped forward, cloak sweeping, and her eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "Neither should you." The shadows deepened around them, swallowing the ruined fortress. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, its cry like a judgment. The ruined fortress loomed before Isolde like a corpse draped in fog. Its walls were scarred by centuries of wind and siege, ivy clutching at crumbling stone as if it were holding the structure together by sheer will. She dismounted, her boots crunching against gravel littered with shattered pottery and rusted iron. The night air carried a bitter chill, and yet she felt a warmth deep in her chest, an excitement born of purpose, not fear. The figure from the shadows stepped closer. Cloaked, hooded, and silent, they revealed a face partially hidden beneath a mask of soot. Only the sharp curve of a jaw and a hint of a scar on the temple gave away its identity: Lord Marius, Ulrich's stepson, and the last male heir to the Westermont estate. He was supposed to despise her, to blame her for the upheaval in his life, yet he had come, compelled by some unknown force. "My lady," he said cautiously, voice low. "I did not think you would survive court, or the city. Isolde's eyes glimmered in the dim moonlight. Survival is nothing without power, Marius. And power is nothing without cunning. Tonight, we reclaim what has been stolen from us. He studied her, the wariness in his eyes melting slowly into curiosity, then into reluctant admiration. Your cunning, it terrifies even me. Good, she replied, a thin smile curving her lips. Fear is a sharper tool than loyalty. They entered the fortress through a crumbling archway, and the darkness embraced them. Othric followed silently, hand resting on the hilt of his sword, eyes scanning for ambush. Within, the fortress was more ruin than structure: collapsed beams, toppled staircases, and the lingering scent of mildew. Yet Isolde moved with the confidence of someone reclaiming territory, her presence commanding even the shadows. In the central hall, a fire flickered, a remnant from someone who had sought shelter here long before. On the cracked stone table lay a bundle wrapped in coarse cloth. Isolde knelt and unwrapped it carefully. Inside were documents, ledgers, deeds, and letters detailing the theft of her family lands, the bribery of magistrates, and the betrayal of nobles who had feigned allegiance to her father. She ran her fingers over the pages, her eyes scanning each carefully. Names she had marked in her private ledger matched those in these records. The trail of injustice stretched across the entire northern region. Every stolen manor, every broken alliance, every humiliation inflicted upon the Riarnach lineage could now be traced, documented, and used. This, she whispered, is the key. Marius leaned over her shoulder, his breath cold on the parchment. And what will we do with it? Isolde looked up at him, her face illuminated by the flickering firelight, a mask of serene determination. We will dismantle them. One by one. Justice is a ladder, Marius, and tonight, we begin our climb. Outside, the wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves, likely patrols sent by the king. Isolde did not flinch. She had anticipated such measures. They were always steps behind her, never ahead. First, she said, standing, we restore Westermont's holdings to their rightful heirs. Then, we strike at those who benefited from Ulrich's treachery. And finally, she paused, letting the words hang in the cold air, we make certain that the crown knows the power of the widow they underestimated. Othric's eyes narrowed. And if the king himself seeks to thwart us? Then, Isolde replied, voice steady, he will find that I am not the widow they believed me to be. Their first move was swift. Under the cover of night, they rode to a neighboring manor, long abandoned after the death of its lord in battle and the seizure of its lands by opportunistic neighbors. Isolde moved silently, her presence like a shadow passing over the land. With Othric and Marius at her side, she reclaimed the estate, uncovering hidden stores of gold, arms, and documents proving the illegality of its seizure. By dawn, the manor was hers, its banners once flown in defiance replaced with the black stag of Riarnach, a symbol that had lain dormant for decades. Villagers who had once whispered her family's fall now knelt before her, eyes wide, hands trembling. Some wept, some bowed, but all knew that the widow was no longer merely a widow. She was a force to be reckoned with. News traveled fast. By the third day, whispers of her actions reached Velmire Palace. The queen's fury was quiet but palpable, seeping into every council meeting, every banquet, every shadowed corridor. The king, meanwhile, seemed torn, fascinated by her cunning yet fearful of its implications. Every message sent by Isolde to loyal lords hinted at her growing power, her careful orchestration of alliances. It was on the fifth night that the first true test arrived. A group of armed men, dispatched by one of the nobles she had targeted, attempted to ambush her at a small outlying village. They did not anticipate the widow's preparation. Isolde, standing atop a hill as the men approached, gave the signal. Marius and Othric emerged from hiding, their swords flashing in the moonlight, cutting a path that left the attackers scrambling and fleeing. After the skirmish, Isolde addressed the villagers, her voice ringing clear and commanding. "Let it be known," she said, "that those who betray justice will find no refuge. The Riarnach line endures, and those who serve treachery will answer in kind." Her words spread like wildfire, carried by travelers and merchants to every corner of the northern territories. Fear mingled with admiration, respect mingled with terror. By the time she returned to the fortress, Isolde had become more than a widow. She was a symbol, a shadow of vengeance and inevitability. Yet, even as her triumph grew, so too did the danger. The king, now fully aware of her ambition and cunning, began to whisper orders in secret chambers, plotting to curtail her influence. Lady Moran, the queen, moved in tandem, gathering allies who could challenge Isolde's growing power. Court intrigue thickened, a web of spies and informants circling ever closer. And still, Isolde pressed on. She moved like a phantom through the northern estates, claiming each manor, reclaiming each ledger, weaving the strands of revenge and justice into a tapestry that no one could ignore. The nobles she had marked, the ones who had laughed at her grief, dismissed her as weak, or stolen from her, found themselves under scrutiny, their every action shadowed by her reach. One evening, in the heart of the fortress, Isolde spread a map across the stone table, her finger tracing the borders of lands yet to be reclaimed. Marius watched silently, admiration and concern etched into his young face. "They will come for us," he said, voice tight with tension. "They will," Isolde replied calmly. "But by the time they arrive, it will already be too late." A sudden knock echoed through the hall, sharp and insistent. Othric drew his sword instinctively, eyes darting to the shadowed doorway. Isolde moved to the door and opened it slowly, revealing a figure cloaked in the insignia of Velmire Palace. The stranger bowed, removing a hood to reveal a face familiar and feared. "Lady Isolde," the man said, voice hushed. "The Queen sends her regards and a warning. She knows of your triumphs, and she will not stand idle." Isolde's eyes narrowed, a smile playing across her lips. "Let her come," she said. "Let her bring the court, the king, or even their armies. Every step they take only brings them closer to ruin." The messenger bowed once more and disappeared into the night. Alone in the hall, Isolde felt the weight of her deeds, the rising tide of power mingled with the danger it attracted. Yet, for the first time since Ulrich's death, she felt alive. Outside, the wind howled through the broken walls of the fortress, and the moon cast long shadows over the land. Somewhere in the darkness, a figure watched, eyes glinting, a smile cruel and knowing. The widow had triumphed, but her greatest challenge had yet to come.